Welcome to Your Voice to the World. I'm Eddie Pinero, speaker, filmmaker, and storyteller, teaming up with Terrence McMahon, retired CEO and best-selling author. Having built multi-million-dollar businesses and created lifestyle brands enjoyed by millions around the world, we've established a blueprint to do more and become more. Now we're joining forces to inspire you to share your voice and build the business and lifestyle you've always dreamed of. Welcome to Your Voice to the World. I'm Eddie Pinero.
I'm Terrence McMahon.
And today you will be riveted. We're going to be talking about Riveted by Jim Davies and how we can take last week's concepts of storytelling and kick it up a notch.
Make it riveting.
Make it riveting.
Love that word.
I know.
That's actually, the book title wasn't going to be Riveted. It was going to be The Compellingness Foundation Theory.
Which isn't very riveting.
That's right. He changed it because the book is all about how to become more interesting, more compelling, and how to get people to pay attention to your story, which is a good lead-in from what we did last week.
It's perfect. Yeah, because the question we always ask when we're picking a book is like, how does someone starting a business or creating or building, like what value will they take away from this? And we think this is a big one. It's, based on what you're offering, the stories you're telling, what are some tweaks, what are some things, what are some ways you can position your argument so that, your story kills it, your brand kills it, that it connects with people mentally.
We've touched a little bit on one of my favorite topics, which is the cognitive biases.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know this when we read this book. Chapter, I think, 6 talks about the psychology of bias and all the evolution embedded in biases and how we behave. And because riveting, the first principle in riveting is people pay attention to people. Mm. And it goes down to the status. And we pay particular attention to people that are either equal our own status,
right,
above our status but falling, or below our status and rising, chasing us.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
It is. And cool caveat is we don't even know we're doing it, right? So this is like this stuff that we're interested in. Like my thought went to like YouTube suggested lists, and it's stuff you got to click and you're watching. It's like, why the hell am I watching this? And it's because a lot of it is because of the biases mentioned in this book, stuff that. So the example you just mentioned, we're more inclined to be interested in someone we know or someone we're aware of going down in status, or someone on a social hierarchy moving up in status, because it subconsciously threatens our position, right?
Right.
And so we want to be aware of that because back, thousands and thousands of years, that's a survival mechanism.
Yeah, it's made you create allies. Status is an ally creator. It's a treaty that you make with somebody, or if you're falling, it's a broken treaty.
Right.
Falls apart. Like, think about your I think you just hit 200,000 subscribers.
Big day.
That's what's that? 8 Fenway Parks.
That's so weird when you think about it like that. Yeah.
A couple Red Sox fans. Yeah. 200,000 people like your content enough that they follow it. What if someone that started earlier than you, that went from 50,000 to 100,000 quicker? You'd notice that.
Yeah, my ears would perk right up, right? Because you want to know what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever they're smoking, share it with others. But that's what but status is all about. Improving your allies. I mean, becoming more interesting, I guess, and more more useful to know. A change in status, someone falling or someone rising, is related to the stories. That's what makes us interesting. And that's what makes stories interesting. Because we talked last episode about how your story could be more interesting, or how you can tell a compelling story. But your story has to tell a story about someone going from one place to another.
Right.
To transport.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's just so relevant. So one of the videos that I watched recently that came up in again, a suggested feed was Peter McKinnon, who's now, a staple. He's a very successful YouTuber, talks about his rise. Mm-hmm. And it's just so interesting. It's like, why? What You know, it almost gives you this feeling in your stomach, like I can't even articulate it, but it's just, you get pulled into that because I need to know the story. I need to, you know.
Right.
So whoever created that video positioned it in a way where me as a consumer, I'm like, oh my God, you know, I got to know.
Right. Yeah. Curious, because another part of riveting is what we as humans, as we've evolved, we've become incredibly interested in patterns.
Right.
Little babies are born and they don't know anything and they are helpless. We're one of the only species that needs someone to bring the babies up until almost 18, 17 years old, whatever. And they're constantly figuring out these patterns. And once you get a pattern figured out, when a baby gets a pattern figured out, there's a hit of dopamine. There's a hit of pleasure. So that's our whole life. But the opposite of which is incongruity. When the pattern isn't making sense, it creates what's called curiosity.
Yeah.
Which is another cognitive bias. Like when we're curious, we're a curious species. We want to figure shit out.
So let's talk about tactically then. So someone watching this and we're talking about patterns, right? Patterns are something that we're, biologically predispositioned to be aware of and attracted to. How can someone watching this or a viewer use that in a positive way? Because it ties into branding and it ties into all the things that make up a good business.
Well, you're not going to be compelled to look at something that is a familiar pattern to you. You want to be either novel or curious. I think those are two of the biases that people are attracted to. What's new, and what can you be curious about? And if you can combine that with two of the other things that are riveting, either hope or fear. Mm-hmm. Okay, things that you hope are true that can help you solve something that's not resolved, or some kind of thing that's out there, or something that you fear is true that can hurt you. Those are both riveting. Like, people like that stuff. So if you can create a story that is curious or novel that helps you solve a problem, you know, or alleviate someone from fear, which is a cousin of pain. Mm-hmm. That's interesting, right? Like running in the rain, for instance.
Right.
You know, you don't want to do something, and you want to advance your way through. You know, that I don't even know why I brought that up.
Well, it's a status. You're starting out at a low point, and you're making your way forward, because it's very easy. I think it ties into the identity thing too, where it's like you are what you believe you are. And so you sort of lock yourself into a particular position, particular identity, and running in the rain's about, almost to your point, right? Your dominoes. It's like, if you do the little things that suck, you elevate your status, you change your life, you put yourself in a position to win. And that's obviously appealing to people. You know, I don't think there's anyone out there that wouldn't want to move closer to their ideal state.
Right, because they want to improve their position. And you know, if you're falling, one of the things about status is, as we tell status and stories, it's all through narrative,
right?
You know, which has a character, and the character is usually involved in some form of conflict. So that conflict's either gonna make you fall or make you rise, right? Nothing's interesting unless there's conflict.
It's like in the cartoons, like you walk into this cloud of dust. And you come out, it's going to be different, maybe worse, maybe better, but it's going to be different. Right. And that conflict is where you change, you adapt. I mean, I'd like to think it might position you, like life sometimes, the conflict, the things we face in life might put us in a difficult spot, but also at the same time, and you're improving and you're positioning yourself to succeed, because like we talk about frequently, those negative situations are actually what propel you. But that all comes from conflict. Conflict's that room you walk into and you're walking out a different person. The question's, what do you do with it?
Right.
Do you run in the rain or do you not?
I was talking to a kid that I worked with, and he was smart as a whip, like totally smart. He's actually in the intervention business, which is incredibly interesting business. He talked about all these stories about people that were on crystal meth or they're on heroin, and they've been, one kid was digging these fictitious worms out of his arm because he was reacting to the crystal meth. And every time I talked to him and interviewed him, he was like a little boring, and he wasn't wondering why he had people weren't like attaching to his story, not sharing his stories. I said, well, you'd be a little more riveting if you were, told something more interesting about yourself.
Right.
And he said, well, I'm interesting. I said, well, how so? He goes, well, I was abducted when I was 5 for 15 years.
That's a story.
That's pretty riveting.
I'd unpack that for your audience.
Well, I knew the kid for like a year and a half before he ever told me. I said, why didn't you tell? He was like literally on a milk carton. And he didn't put that into his narrative. He didn't talk about how he was this one, a little kid, and then he got abducted, and then he went, lost 15 years of his life.
Jeez.
And then something happened. That's riveting. That's interesting.
Right.
But the 3-part story system that we talked about, you have backstory, conflict, resolution, and he failed to include that. And a lot of times we work on people's story and brands. You'll see someone that has this is who I am. I went to this school. I got married. I bought this house. I live in Boston. I got 2 kids. Okay, that's not necessarily riveting. It's not going to hurt you.
There's no novelty.
Yeah. So you got to dig.
Right.
Everyone's gone through something. If you haven't, you've been connected to something.
Right. Or you even come across every once in a while maybe an internet marketer that fabricates that that little transition.
we always make fun of them, yeah.
Yeah. But last night, so the 3 of us went to a movie. What was the name of it? Ford versus Ferrari movie?
That was Ford versus Ferrari. Yeah. That was loaded with it.
Every time. So it's like I felt like we couldn't even dip into the movie because we'd be looking at each other and be like, story. Oh
yeah.
There's one point where the guy he's giving a presentation and no data, or he is giving data for a while, and the Ford is like, I don't care, and then he gets into the emotion, taps into the heartstrings, and the music comes in, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, like, story. That's how you sell ideas.
That was he woke up Henry Ford.
Yeah.
He told a story on how he wouldn't be just a shadow of his father.
Right.
He'd be the guy. That was a good movie. That was all about someone who was high in status, right? What was his name? Shelby. The driver who won the Le Mans, and then I think he ended up having to leave because he had a heart problem, and then he was this kind of car salesman building engines, and then Ford got in an arms race with trying to do sports cars when they brought the Mustang out. So they hired this team of all wash-ups. It was an old driver and this guy Shelby to build.
What was his partner's name? Do you remember? Miles
Miller. What was it? Ken Miles. Ken Miles. Yeah, the driver. It's a famous driver.
Yeah, that was the huge status transformation.
Oh yeah, so he ended up going from a mechanic to he won all 3 races in a row. But it's all about that. Now that's interesting. That's what makes box office hits. So if you have a story and you're not adding elements of conflict and elements of status change, either someone chasing you that can hurt you or someone falling that you can overcome, and it doesn't have to be a person, just can be like an event. That's a big part of making a story more interesting and making it compelling.
Yeah. And it's cool the way he talks about it. It's like the stuff that's under the hood, like the brain, the frontal lobe, or prefrontal cortex that we're aware of. Mm-hmm. And then the sort of lizard brain, the stuff that's really ingrained in us that we share with people.
The reptilian.
Yeah. Well, not people, but yeah.
Yeah. One's a millions of years old, and the other one's, I think, hundreds of thousands of years old. There's been as you were talking about an interesting point I'll ask you about in a second. The tug of war between the old brain, which is the reactive brain. That's the one that it's instinctual, and then the new one knows better.
Right.
With sugar, because we're not scarce in calories anymore, and sugar's fast acting energy. So every time you tug a war with the old brain, you always lose, even though he knows better.
Well, that's the thing that's so interesting. It's like these like if you take them and you apply them to marketing or whatever pursuit, it's not the new brain you're looking at. It's the old one you're trying to tap into.
Right.
It's the almost the subconscious.
What was the thing you said?
The elephant and the rider?
The elephant and the rider, yeah. Talk about that.
Yeah,
cool.
So this is Jonathan Haidt's metaphor where he's talking about the rational brain versus the emotional brain. and he paints it in the way of a big elephant on a path with a rider on top. And the rider on top is a rational brain. The elephant is the emotional components of the brain. And it's like the rider's technically in control, but if the elephant or the emotional part's not captivated, it's not going to go anywhere, right? The rider can't get off and push that elephant anywhere. You need to be emotionally captivated. Your emotions have to line up with what you're trying to do before there will be any progress. And then the path being sort of the third component where, you obviously want to mitigate obstacles and make it as easy for you as possible.
Right.
But yeah, so basically, long story short, you got that in tandem, the rider, the rational brain, the elephant, which is the emotional piece.
Your entire brand is based upon getting people off the dime.
Yeah.
Against, because the elephant doesn't want to move. Remember, on top of fast acting energy, the second one is conserving. Like, people want to rest.
Right.
That's why the brain shuts down if you're not interesting. We spend 30% of our time in the day daydreaming, because when the brain shuts down, I just read this, that 30% of the day we spend in daydreaming. When something's not interesting, like if this podcast isn't interesting, people just switch it off.
Right.
But I've been doing speeches, and I know I'm losing people, and I see people like falling asleep, because if it's not helping someone survive or conserve energy or
they're
done. It's all that's Maslow's hierarchy. The first one is survival. The second one is safety, and which is being safe, and the third one's procreating. But if it's not helping them, those three things, they shut it down.
Right.
Like the car at the stoplight now. My car just goes boop. The engine shuts off. It's conserving energy.
But and why knowing that is so powerful. Like, so for example, in the mornings, and this is a recent thing, but I started playing that McRaven speech for a week and a half every day, and it just, the impact is, it puts me in such an emotive state. I feel so excited and just so like, it almost gives an importance to what I'm doing. Whereas if I skip that, it's hard to manufacture that type of thing.
Is that the make your bed speech?
I love that speech. Yeah. I'll say that a million times. I think that's the best speech I've ever heard written.
He's right there. And then
I mean, that's in my lifetime. We'll put it that way. But there's been some pretty good ones.
You know what that does? I mean, it's a sidebar, but it's similar. That it creates momentum.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And being riveted and having a story, because when you tell a story to someone, you're introducing your idea to somebody, and it better be novel and curious. That creates riveting. If it's about people and stories, even better. If it's about avoiding pain or gaining pleasure, even better. And once you get that, and you can have them to take one step to advance into your ecosystem, how to take your story. That's why it's so important, I'm sure, for your videos to be interesting quick, right?
Right.
Because I remember you were talking with Evan Carmichael, that I saw you guys evaluate a video. He said that people were leaving for some reason at some point. No, they were staying for yours, and another person at the mastermind, they were leaving. Right.
There were certain, so like the end, you can see when people drop off, right? And so for me, I mean, I'm fortunate in that my what's the word? Where people stick around. Retention rate's pretty high. Mm-hmm. But when I get cued at the end and I make some little outro or something like that, boom, gone. No one cares. And so it's like, you can tell there's data points that say, look, here's where you stopped captivating your audience.
Right.
And it always ties to moving from story to, I don't know, something where I'm promoting something or something along those lines.
Or I remember somebody had an introduction to their videos where everyone was falling off. It was the same one every time, and then they learned from it too.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
They learned.
It's hard because like it's a cool intro.
Right.
But it's like, people don't care. They want the content.
Yeah, they want to get at it. Yeah, Yeah, the doctors say enough with the labor pain. Give me the baby. It's like you want to get at it pretty quick.
So, I like going back to our experiences and kind of applying some of this stuff so that listeners can kind of get a feel for how we use this, how we utilize some of these concepts. Now, I'll never forget being in that boardroom. I went with you to, this was in Tampa, and we're sitting in a group or there's a group of us, and I'm kind of a fly on the wall. You're talking about insurance, and the CEO goes, Terrence, broke records, whatever. He was the lead producer, and people are like, where? New York? California? He's like, no, New Hampshire. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's crazy. And so the reason being, you captivated people in a very unique way. You told a story in a very unique way. You were riveting. And I'd be curious to know, like, big picture, holistically, is there anything that's like you can point to that be like, this is why I stood out. This is why in New Hampshire I was able to have this much success.
Oh, that's a very good question. One of the reasons it's and I'll tell you a story to answer that question. Because I was recruiting an individual once, and he was a number 4 person in a number 15 ranked company with an organization. And we were recruiting him. He would have been the number 2 person at a number 4 shop, even though the organization we were recruiting to was smaller than the one he was currently with. So he didn't get a change in pay per se. We paid him pretty good.
Hang on. Sorry, I'm slow here. So he was in a smaller company, but was a bigger fish in that pond.
He was a smaller person in a bigger company. He was
okay.
Yeah. So he was paid. We ended up paying him the exact same amount of money, very close.
Yeah.
Let's say. But he ended up becoming a more significant player in the smaller company. His status was elevated.
I see.
So
okay.
when we recruited him, and it's relevant to what happened in New Hampshire, because we were the biggest fish in a small pond, and we really exploited that. We were the 600-pound gorilla. We were the elephant in that market. So we went anywhere we wanted, and we, when it got down to dollars and cents, we could either outmarket, out implement, or outsell. But when that individual was changed in status, he made the move because he saw his status increase, I believe. He went from being a number 4 person in a very large company. So, strike that, let me back up. He went from being the number 4 person in a number 15 organization to the number 2 person in a number 4 organization. So he went from being way off number 1 to really close, even though the actual pay was no different. A lot of times you can hire someone just by changing their title.
I've read studies on that.
Oh, no. I mean, I've made up roles for people, and they were real roles, but I've done that to create a position that allowed them to feel good about what they do, or to feel as good as they should about what they were currently doing, that their current employer would neglect to recognize them for.
Sometimes it's not even about pay. It's just about feeling like you add value.
I think recognition is, and then every study we've ever done, people were way more motivated by recognition than they were pay.
Yeah.
It was always recognition. It's like, that's status.
And so that was a big part of your strategy then. Always.
Yeah. We had, some companies won't, for whatever reason, they keep changing titles, and as they dilute the bigger companies, a lot of management, and they don't understand how important it is to have status in what you call yourself. Right? When I started calling myself an author, it sounded better than being retired.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing really changed.
Right.
I introduced myself as an author instead of a retired CEO.
Self-narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you feel better too.
Right.
Of course. Yeah. He in Riveted, he talks about the power of fiction. Because people are riveted by stories, because the story was a way for someone to learn without actually experiencing something. Right? We referenced Warren Buffett last week, right?
Yeah. So you don't have to, the power of mentors, right? Like, you don't have to go through the hardships, go through the hell. You can learn and fast track.
Right.
And I think that's an incredible thing. I always say the counter to that is, it's very easy to lose your sense of self and what makes you unique. I just like to always throw that caveat in, because it's real easy, to go online and see how James dribbles a basketball or Bezos builds a business, and the idea is, well, I want to streamline it, I want to copy that, and that makes perfect sense.
Right.
But like, your unique components combined with that also are what ultimately changes the world. Like, you want to be your version of that, you know.
Right.
Steve, you're quiet over there. You got a question for us?
Sure. I was thinking, like, moving forward, like, knowing this thing, kind of revisiting this book, is there anything you're going to kind of do differently, maybe in your videos? Or how would someone building a business that doesn't really have a story about themselves, like a conflict that they've run into, if they're just trying to build a business, how do they use these biases, these different things that you learned from this book to make a riveting story about their business that they're creating?
I think it's awareness. I mean, you know, it's and this is not like you need every single one of these. It's just kind of, it's referencing our impulse, you know, and if things, you know, move us to our hopes and dreams or mitigate our fears, we're more inclined to engage in conversation and become part of something, and ultimately maybe become a customer, become part of your community. And so it's just, it's another one of these things to me that calls you to step back and think about what you're doing so you can be strategic in your approach. Because, yeah, I mean, Instagram's the biggest flag for me, because it's like you're trying to engage an audience. That's literally what you're doing with every post. For better or for worse, you're trying to captivate. And sometimes I put things out and they do well. Sometimes they don't. Everyone's in that boat. We want to know why. What works? How can we do this more consistently? I mean, there's a map in here. It tells you why people are attracted to certain things and what they like. And so it's just another tool. It's another component of awareness.
Well, when you're testing things, Steve, and you're not getting the results that you want, and you want to be a little scientific about it, you just want to randomly wander around and change your story. There's reasons people react to things. That's the whole purpose we picked Riveted. Right. That there's cognitive, psychological triggers of super reaction. And
to be methodical.
The next book we're talking about, Poor Charlie's Almanac and all Charlie Munger's stuff, who's my hero, talks about cognitive biases. But in this book, he's mentioned it in a full chapter that there are 90 cognitive biases. That's people that there's a bias towards negativity.
I thought I was your hero.
People have, you might be. You're my motivational hero. I still listen. It's kind of weird when I'm listening to your video and you walk into my house, by the way. It's a little strange. I think I got some kind of...
Oh my God, that's great.
I don't know. They get me going. I like the one. I like that. I don't want to be the one. I still want to be the one, by the way.
You're the one. You are.
That'll mean a change in status for me.
But the one.
But there's things that make people react, and people react to cognitive biases. The first one is reward. The number one... If you can help someone through your story become riveted to get them a reward, and a reward could mean an increase in status. It could mean just something that they want. That's the most powerful one. The second most powerful one is pain avoidance. People will do 5 times more things to avoid pain than they will gain pleasure.
Right. Which is who are we listening to? The selling formula, where it's like put them in pain. Like you want to put them in pain's a bad way to put it, but you want to expose your potential clients' pain points, right? And then show them the way out.
You want to put the cook in the kitchen, make them feel it,
right?
And that's pain. And when you have that, all you got to really do, if you want to see Riveted, there's a lot of real science in it's called in sales. Look at Amazon. He has very deliberately put many of these cognitive triggers on that site.
Oh yeah.
You'll see reward bias. Get X number of dollars off. You'll see pain there. Like if you don't buy it within a certain amount of time, you don't get it.
Scarcity, ticking clock, 2 left.
Scarcity, tons of authority and social proof with all the reviews and things like that. It's what you'll find out when you put 2 or 3 of them together. It creates what Charlie Munger calls the Lollapalooza effect. It just makes you like completely insane to take action. That's riveting. Riveting is if you can combine a high amount of reward while eliminating pain and making it available and scarce and available, you'll have your clients moving towards what you can do to help them.
Right.
There is a lot of room for abuse because.
What do you mean abuse?
Well, if you know this science, you can use it for bad. You can use it for evil. Oh. You can make people super react for something that's not serving them. You'll see it a lot. There's a lot of unethical use of the cognitive triggers.
Right.
Authority, giving someone the false sense of authority, presenting yourself for someone that you're really not.
A lot of it's trash.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 50% or 90% of all doctors self-identify as being above average. Did you realize that?
Mathematically impossible.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Same thing with drivers, right? That always cracked me up too.
Same number, yeah. Yeah, that's called excessive self-regard bias. So people think they're better than they really are.
Right.
So and curiosity and novelty are both cognitive biases because of what we talked about earlier. People want to discover patterns. So if you're presenting something that is something that they're curious about, you'll see it a lot of times on these ads where someone says, there's 2 foods that you're eating that could be killing you right now, and they'll show a picture of a banana. Click here to find out which one it is. Maybe you're eating it. And all of a sudden you're on some foolish website.
Clickbait is like the definition of misusing this.
Yeah, of course. Really I mean, what are you clicking into?
Right.
Yeah. I've seen so many examples of this, but there's some core cognitive biases that you should study and learn about, and you don't have to be a PhD in psychology. They're available.
Yeah.
He talks about, this guy's a pretty interesting guy. He talks about it. He wants to have a psychological immunity system where you can teach people, some of the scientists, to protect them from misjudgment. Because Charlie Munger says there's a lot of misjudgment using the cognitive biases. You do things you're not supposed to do, like a loud outcry auction.
It's like a superpower.
You end up with some grandfather clock you don't want because you're trying to impress somebody else that you buy this clock or this painting, like that one I have right there.
Well, it's fun. I mean, truly though, just knowing that anytime now I'm online and I see this all the time, everyone does, 2 left. 50% off until this time. It's like none of that's true. You realize like the entire it's all manufactured.
All of it.
All of it. but I've lived 32 years without knowing that.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, and it's awareness that's really helpful.
Well, especially if whatever is left and scarce can improve your status, give you a reward, take away pain, or alleviate curiosity.
Right.
Those are all those, and then that's everything. The cognitive biases that we talk about in the next podcast is all about how to position your product to help people get out of pain and get into pleasure, and do it faster, right? And conserve energy and get better results.
You know what would be fun to do?
What?
Like take something like an Apple commercial that I think is so brilliant, right? So you have an iPhone commercial, but there's no iPhone, and it's just people like dancing around in the rain, and you're like, oh God, like that's so amazing. I want that.
Yeah, the transportation theory, right? It transports you into that.
Right. But utilizing the things he mentions here,
you know what?
my first thought is like maybe status, because it elevates, I don't know, having the latest version is like it's definitely a novelty thing. I don't know. I just thought it'd be fun to kind of piece that together, because I watch every time I see one of those commercials, I'm like, that's just magic. Like that's so brilliantly done.
He gets you. I walked into Apple yesterday with my son.
Yeah.
We were in Apple. And the guy walked up to me and says, what would you like? I says, I have everything, but I want to buy something.
Right.
I don't know why. I want to feel like that guy in the commercial. Apple makes you feel, when you go from doing the feeling, you've hit the mark.
It's definitely the elephant it's tapping into.
Yeah,
but
yeah. And then fiction, things that aren't true, learning from fiction, that's a big deal when you talk about, your story. Because that came up too. It's like how you see, like you were talking about Nemo, right? The fish, the stupid fish thing.
Was
it?
Something we were watching earlier, the Nemo.
Oh, were you
thing.
talking about Nemo? There's a way I wanted to connect the dots to. I saw something that could be a good way to.
Dude, is it just hopes? It's like what you aspire to be, because it's clearly not a phone. It's a gateway to communicate, social media, portray yourself a certain way. It almost is a tool for recreation.
To me, it feels like the creative inspiration. Like when I see Apple commercials, this like makes you feel like you want to create stuff, and that's like a lot of their products that I like about them. Like compared to like PC and different things, it's like very smooth to create.
They tailor it to creators.
Yes. So I think that's what the commercials kind of represent as well. Is like they're so creative and they inspire you to do that. And us as creators, you want to feel that as well.
Well, you feel good when you figure a pattern out. I mean, when you figure out a pattern, your brain is programmed to reward you. That's why we're constantly, all these kids play with their phones. It's a pattern device. It's like a dopamine machine. These video game makers make these games so that there's patterns constantly being figured out. And there's constant incongruity that you make congruent. All the games and video games are designed to do that. But life's designed to do that.
But could that be it? Connecting the dots from this to a feeling of happiness. Like that's a pattern.
It seems to make a lot of people happy.
Or at least temporarily. The dopamine blast.
Whatever happiness means, but we're programmed to want to be in happiness. So the reward system, which is the number one cognitive bias, is dopamine feedback. It's reward and pleasure zones in the brain. Mm-hmm. So as we're doing something and we're solving problems and solving patterns, we get rewarded, and that anything that helps you do that is riveting. Anything that helps you do that is compelling.
Yeah.
Like if you could take a pill and remember more, there's commercials about that, right? You could take a pill and remember more. Would you be inclined to do that if it was safe?
Yes.
How much would you pay?
A lot.
Everything.
Everything.
Right? Yeah. Because you can make everything more by being able to do that. And that's where a lot of times you'll see advertisers use the cognitive biases in an unethical way, because it probably doesn't do that. There's a lot of claims. These crazy claims are not FDA approved drugs, and people are this does this or this does that, and then down the bottom it says results are not typical. Mm-hmm. It's like, come on, man.
We know. We see.
Like
we've read.
Like you got that foolish dunk training program. You can't help me dunk.
Yeah, so I guess you wouldn't be in my market.
Can't help a 50-year-old. Former plus size supermodel dunk. That'd be big. That'd be a big YouTube channel. Plus size supermodel can jam.
If you can make him dunk, you will be a millionaire in a week.
We were talking about that today. I was like, it's not 0%. It's not 0%. If I could touch the rim, can I dunk?
If you can really touch the rim, then I think you can. It's just a matter of like what state your like muscles and tendons are in.
Yeah, you just have to change a lot of your personal habits.
Well, I got a left knee problem. Can I dunk on one leg?
It's kind of like a race against time at this point. You know what I mean?
Basically, you're dead, bro.
It's not even that. It's just that like the amount of time tendons take to get stronger and like be able to withstand the force of a jump takes a long time. And like by the time that happens, it's like it's hard.
Well, you're in the dunking business, right? You want to create riveting content. You have riveting content. Why do you think people watch it?
I think because it's something they aspire to do. A lot like as a young boy growing up, like everyone I knew would love to dunk. Whenever there was a low rim, we'd love to go dunk. If there was a trampoline, we'd love to go dunk. So it's always been like everyone's dream to like dunk, and it looks like a dream type of activity. So right. I feel like especially myself, when I got inspired to do it, is I saw somebody that was average doing it. So that was extremely riveting because it made me believe that I could do it, and that also that I could live out a dream like that.
Right, which would be what? Which would happen if someone can dunk? What would that really be? It's a reward, but is also a change in status. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can dunk because you're part of a unique.
Yeah, I can say I jump higher than you, and I could dunk on you.
Yeah, we didn't have any. We had a kid that was 6'6" or 6'7" that couldn't dunk on our basketball team. I mean,
Fix him right up.
Relatively rare to find someone that can dunk, but that elevates your status. So people are watching that. It's compelling because you are not a typical person that can dunk a basketball.
Basically, is the simpler.
See, that's my personal opinion too. I don't have any data, but I think it's because you see someone literally moving up when in the dunking world, like a status like that should most 5'9", 5'10" people can't windmill dunk. Mm-hmm. You can. I think and that makes it entertaining. I don't know how many of your followers themselves have dreamed about dunking. Mm-hmm. I think about that a lot because it goes from instructing to entertaining, right. You know? And I'm just that we talk about this all the time. We're like, we play around with stuff.
But if you're on a commercial, if Steve was selling his program and he says, "Are you 5'9" like me and you never want to dunk?" and you want to be part of the few people that could dunk, well, guess what?
That's appealing.
I have a secret formula that I use, someone who's 5'9", to dunk. And I can teach anybody who's 5'9", or taller to learn how to dunk within 90 days.
So put a number right now. What percentage of people that watch Dunk Life do you think go out after watching one of your videos, pick up a basketball and try? Or
well, I get a lot of comments that are saying that, like, one of my favorite parts about it is that they get motivated to go work out. They get motivated to go try.
Yeah.
And, like, those are like the most riveting comments, if I keep using that word, but it's just, that's inspiring for me and also motivating for me to make the content.
You're
but
moving people. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. That's like the best part. Because I was in their place too, and I got super moved by it. So to be a part of that. But as far as the percentage of people that are going to do it, I think a lot more than, what's cool is that it's a lot more than people that were just watching it on TV. Like, for example, like a kid watching NBA and he sees like Nate Robinson dunk, who's 5'9" in the NBA. Like, when they see him dunk, they're not saying, oh, let me go try because he's my height. But because I'm making content and they can see my videos and they can go back and easily go to my YouTube channel and see my oldest videos where I wasn't dunking at all, like barely touching the rim, I think that makes it compelling because you see the bridge and you see my own status change, quote unquote, of like me going from not being able to doing it to doing it. So I think it raises the percentage, but I don't know if it's like, I definitely think a big percentage of my viewers get motivated to go attempt or go start training.
Yeah, I'm genuinely, because I watch every video you put out. I love your stuff. Yeah, but I can't remember the last time I've tried dunking.
You like to watch it, even though you can't do it, because you can live through.
It's just amazing. It's just amazing to watch.
That's what the role playing games are about. So that, in its own way, is compelling. And in Steve's case, like we were having a conversation about this today. Is like when you get aged out, there'll be a time when you won't be able to do that anymore. But you still have the technology that you use to piece together to go from one social status to a way higher one.
Right.
That is, if you can connect those dots, that story of how you did one thing and now you can use that to do anything, which is the name of your book, right? Dunk and do anything. That's riveting. That's compelling. Like, what's the most compelling video? I'll give you a second to answer, but I'll answer my own question first with the most common question I get. Of all the things I've been through and done in my life, what do you think the most common question I get is?
With all the things you've done. So someone just meeting you now?
I get this probably for people that know me and people that didn't know me, but they don't know my story. I get this probably
did you lose weight?
80% of the time. Yeah, it's how'd you lose so much weight? 80%. 80% of the time, that's the question they ask. It's compelling. You see it before and after picture. Like people are like, wow, how'd you do it?
Right.
It's called the story loop.
Hero's journey?
Yeah, it's a story loop. You see that, and when I did my keynote at Your World Within Live, my first picture early on was I was 350-pound morbidly obese. And I'm standing there 200 pounds, not morbidly obese and alive. And I opened up a story loop. So people want to resolve that. It's curious. There's incongruency. That's all part of that. So what videos, what parts of your journey do people get curious about with you that you think's riveting or compelling?
I think it's the filler between the dots of being just, not content to doing something that I love to do, that I'm proud of, and that, has given me the freedom to live how I want to live. So that's a big, that's a big story loop too. It's like, how do you fill those dots?
Because so many people probably are not content.
Right. That's
they want to be fulfilled.
And it depends too if you're macro or micro. I mean, everyone's got something that perhaps they're not thrilled with that they'd like to fix. And so you can take lessons and experiences and apply them to, anything. Like I get messages sometimes about just running. Eddie, I see you talk about running a lot and how it's helped you. I don't usually run, but it sounds like it'd be a cool thing to start. What can I do? That's not necessarily a crisis or a problem, but it's a beginning point or a point of friction, tension, discontent to something that can be rewarding.
I have another one that I think would be compelling. It was compelling when I first met you because I didn't know anything about that black box of social media, whatever the hell that is. Network marketing. But
right.
I met you, and you're a cool dude, and reasonably cool. And I was like, how the hell can you make a living? How can you pay your bills and not do anything? Like, technically, you don't do anything. Like, what do you do?
Do you
get that question?
Yeah. What exactly do you do?
How do you explain it?
I always say I don't have a great elevator speech. I have a hard time, right? It's a storytelling thing. So, a couple times a week, I'll write something and I'll create these little stories and I'll put them out on YouTube. And that's the foundation. Like, that's, and it, by the way, it took me a long time to get there. It's not like you just do that and all of a sudden life is fine and dandy, right? We've talked about this a million times. It takes years to get to a point where people are listening, you're adding value, you have credibility. But so that's the foundation. And then from that, people want more. When you're helping people, when you're adding value, there's usually different avenues you can then take or pivot. Mm-hmm. And so, that's where I write a lot of speeches for people. I create videos for people. I consult around branding and telling a story and building a message. And so all of those things fall under that umbrella. But to your point, you look at it and what do you see? You see a YouTube channel and you're like, I don't get it, right? Where are the legs that this stands on?
Well, that in itself is compelling. Do you want to learn how to make a good six-figure living, six-figure income without leaving your house?
Right.
Online. That's compelling.
Yeah.
Right?
And people, they don't know, right? Because it's still, sometimes it's being in a room 13 hours pumping this stuff out.
Right.
Sometimes it's 3 days in the Caymans where we mastermind for an hour a day and the rest kind of, it's ups and downs.
But this was a difficult, of all the ones we've done so far, this one was the hardest, I think.
It's just a lot to process.
Because it's a very difficult topic to master. Yeah. This is the most difficult one. You don't get 52 million views on YouTube without being riveted.
Right.
People are riveted. They're compelled to watch. And I think the summary is that people love to see characters go through, overcome conflict, and transform and get resolution, which is an increase in status. I mean, that's what people want and do. And I think that's what makes this book such a good read and so important if you want to share your message with the world and build it into a business. If you're not riveting and compelling, you better get a second job.
Right. Yeah. And it's perfect to pair with last week's book too.
Yeah.
If you're looking for kind of the both sides of the coin, two quick reads that work very well together, the storytelling secrets, creating a captivating story, selling yourself, presenting something, and then this being sort of the part two or the sequel where it's like, okay, what are some tools or tricks that I can do to really have a leg up or an advantage to take that home? I think coupling those two is pretty cool.
Yeah, because you could take this, apply it to your existing marketing efforts. You're going to take it and apply it to your existing conversations and stories. If you know nothing about story, if you watch the last two episodes, you learn how to design a story, and now you can make supplemental changes in it to bring the most compelling parts out and get people to take action, which helps them come into your world.
Within.
Sweet. Next week's book is
Charlie Munger.
Hubs Up Top. So poor Charlie's almanac is actually in a pretty expensive book. It's like $150. So a lot of people don't want to run out and grab it. But this is a collection of all the secret sauce. A lot of people don't know that Charlie Munger is the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's partner. And they've been partners for years. I just saw them in Omaha at the stockholders meeting. I did a little thing out there for a group. And this book is going to be a little deep dive through the cognitive biases, the 25 cognitive biases, what he calls of human super misjudgment and judgment. The way that people react. It's a killer book. But we'll also be drifting into some of the other stuff Charlie Munger's done.
Yeah, so it's a great read. We're probably going to focus on that one particular chapter, right? The cognitive biases. Yep. But yeah, super excited. So it's a continuation. Hopefully you guys can see, the progression that we've been making through sort of the journey from starting podcast one, narrowing things down, telling your story, sharing a voice, creating captivating, riveting content. And we're going to keep pushing that pushing down the tracks.
I think we're at the point where we want to take some audience participation, right, Steve?
We got to do that.
Yep. So
We're looking at.
we could just tweet at us, Facebook, anywhere you see the content on the YouTube channel. Leave a comment. I'll get to it. You're probably going to deal with me, so ask your question. I'll ask it to these guys, and then we'll answer it on the podcast.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up.
Wrap up here. Poor Charlie's Almanac next week.
Your voice to the world. Take care, guys.
Take care.